Recording in progress. Maimer from Anila Doidi Vododi Li, Shabbos Parshas Re'eh. We're already beginning Shabbos Mevarchim, so we're going to start with Anila Doidi, Shabbos Mevarchim El. It says, Anila Doidi Vododi Li, Haro'a B'Shoshanim, I am to my beloved is to me, the one who goes out to pasture, who grazes amongst the roses. And he explained the Torah about Bedrushim Shenitzu Parshas Re'eh in Mamorim that were printed under Parshas Re'eh, that he's already talking also, just like this Shabbos is Shabbos Mevarchim, and El, and it's still Parshas Re'eh. The same thing, the Mamorim of the Torah are also talking about the topic of Elul under the name of the Parsha of Re'eh. It says, I'm to my beloved is to me, is Rosh Tevis of the word Elul, V'Haro'a B'Shoshanim. And the idea, what does it mean that the Yidden are grazing, are going out to pasture amongst the roses? The Shoshana Yeshbam, the Shloisha Osar Mechilin Derachim. The Yeshla Tleisar Alim, a rose has 13 petals, Keneged Shloisha Osar Mechilin Derachim, that correspond, the Zohar says, to the 13 aspects of compassion and mercy. Midas Harachim. It's referring to the 13 attributes of mercy that have become revealed at this period of time, beginning in Rosh Chodesh El until after Yom Kippur. That this is 40 days from Rosh Chodesh El until Yom Kippur is 40 days if you count the first day of Rosh Chodesh as well, because Elul is a is a 29-day month in our present calendar. So you have 29 days of Elul, you have 10 days of Tishrei, so then you have 39 days plus the first day of Rosh Chodesh El, which is the 30th day of Av, so you have 40 days. It says, the 40 days from Rosh Chodesh El until and through Yom Kippur is hinted in the 4 letters Yud that's at the end of each of the 4 words in the phrase Anila Doidi V'Doidi Li. 4 times Yud, Yud is 10, 4 times Yud is 40. So what's the significance of the number 40, and specifically this time of the 40 days on the calendar from Rosh Chodesh El until Yom Kippur? Because those 40 days in history, Moshe Rabbeinu went up high at this time to receive the final luchas, the second set of luchas. And at this time, it's a very auspicious time, it's a very special time. Because on the last 40 days, it says that it will be like the first days. We have this in Chumash last week. Like the first days, the last days. The question is, why did the Torah have to say Kayam Marishonim? It says it's 40 days. Anybody knows. First days were 40 days. The last days are 40 days. Why does it have to say Kayam Marishonim? So the Chazal derived from this, from the words Kayam Marishonim, Mayam Marishonim Beratzim Chulum, just like the first days are something that was done, that Hashem accepted, and was in a way of Ratzin, that Hashem's will was manifest in a loving manner, and so too, so that was, and so on, so just like it was that way in the first 40 days, the same thing was in the latter 40 days as well, that Hashem's will was in a state that was revealed, and so on. So he says, the brackets on line 13, from this is understood the great advantage of all the days of the month of Elul, beginning from the first day of the 40 days, they are all considered like one entity. And then it's a time that's auspicious. That's an auspicious time, a will time. That in those 40 days it becomes revealed the 13 attributes of mercy. This is a great and awesome advantage and quality. In addition to the fact that it becomes revealed, the 13 attributes of mercy, that in general the 13 attributes has to do with davening, so it becomes yesh noi gam inyan HaTorah. There's also the idea of Torah. That's the idea of the 13 attributes, that the Torah is derived from the 13 rules, the 13 principles that we say every morning before Haidu. We say the Bishmol would enumerate the 13 principles by which we can derive Torah laws. So therefore, Elul has the great advantage both of Tefillah and Torah, these 40 days especially. The Torah continues, all the Havans that to be able to understand this. Why if it's such a great divine revelation during this time, why are they considered weekdays? They're not days of celebration, they're not Yom Tov. The question is also concerning Shabbosim. Shabbosim are not weekdays. So seemingly the questions only apply to the 40 days or the 30 days, 29 days of El. Subtract the Shabbosim from it. So the Rebbe says no. The question also includes Shabbosim, top of page Vav. The reason why Shabbos is unique and different has nothing to do with the 13 attributes of the month of El. It's because Shabbos, every seventh day of the week, is Shabbos and has its own special, unique thing of Shabbos. Shabbos is special, unique, because it follows the 6 days of the week. The Mishnah taught about Shabbos, because whoever toils before Shabbos will eat on Shabbos, which means Shabbos is a build-up and a follow-up of the days of the week. So since Shabbos is a follow-up from the days of the week, so that is why we have this uniqueness of Shabbos, but it's not something that has to do with the 13 attributes, with the Yudim and Sarachim that shines in the month of El. So that's Alter Rebbe's question in Likutei Torah on Parshas Re'eh on Anila Doidi. Alter Rebbe explains, third line from the top of the page, Mevayer, Achine Yuvan Al Pi Moshel HaMelech, Sheb'Terem Ba'Li. This will be understood by using the analogy and a metaphor of a king before he comes to the city. The people of the city go out towards him and greet him in the field. And then they are permitted and they are able to. And if they're permitted and they're able to, so it's understood that they actually do so. The following: whoever wants to go out, they can go out and greet him. He receives everyone with a pleasant, beautiful face and a smiling countenance. When he goes into the city, and afterwards when he comes to his royal palace, and the kach, so too, by way of a metaphor, the time of the month of El is a time when everybody goes out to greet the light of the face of Hashem in the field. So the Rebbe now poses a few diyukim here. We need to understand concerning the marshal of the king of the field specifically. Why specifically the field? He's going to challenge this, that seemingly it would be a better thing if we would talk about the king being in the in a wilderness, as we'll soon see why that would be better. So first of all, the Rebbe says, why am I making such a big deal about a mashal? The kivim shum mashal shabbatayda, since it's a mashal and Torah. How they call a pratim shabbat mashal tzrichim lism diyakim. All the details and the mashal have to be exact. When a regular person gives a mashal, it's not a mashal and Torah. So then, not all the details of the mashal are always exact in the nimshal and the thing that it's being compared to. But when Torah enumerates a mashal and gives details of that mashal, So the details of that mashal are not there for window dressing. The fact that the Torah's emes, uses those details and speaks about those details because those details are important to be able to understand what's going on. So the Rebbe goes on to ask line 16, the Lechura seemingly. Just like in one extreme of the mashal, as far as after the king was greeted, after he left the field. So the mashal goes on in details about how far in and leaving the field does the king go. Afterwards he says he comes to his royal palace. The mashal is not happy and satisfied with just saying, well, the king went into the city. That's not enough. He adds a higher thing of his royal palace. So too, if so, just like he's talking about when he enters into the city, he goes to the utmost extreme, that the king doesn't just enter the city, but he enters his royal palace. So the same thing in the other extreme, the mashal of the mashal. He should have said, but he should have given a metaphor of a king, not just in the field, but also in a wilderness. Because he's going to the highest place, so he should start from the lowest place, from the furthest place, that the king is out in the wilderness. That's lower than a field. Since the wilderness is a place that no person inhabits, no person settles over there, it has no connection with human beings, with people. Just in the very Maimer לדודי with Alter Rebbe the Torah, he speaks about how low and how negative the wilderness is. So if we're talking about the king coming in the most extremely highest place, he should have started from the most extreme lowest place in the way of a wilderness. But you're going to ask a question, but you need to bring a mashal from something that makes sense, both in the mashal and in the nimshal. Who says the king is even found in the wilderness? Maybe the king is not even there in the wilderness. So how can I say, well, just like you say the extreme, that he's going to come into the royal palace, you have to go the other extreme. He started off in the wilderness. But if it's not factual, if it's not right, if it's not neither in the mashal nor in the nimshal, why would the king be in the wilderness? So the Rebbe says the king is to be found in the wilderness. So he says in line 25, that even in the wilderness, the king is found. Just like the Yidden before they came to a settled land. The Yidden were 40 years in the wilderness. The great and awesome wilderness, meaning it was a terrible place. It was a place, again, which is not made for human habitation, and also not made, like the supernal man is not settled over there. Still in all, the Yidden were there. And if they were there, he's going to explain, the way they were there was in the way that they had the Eibishter with them. The ark would travel before them, or protis, and even more specific. So we see that itself, that the ark traveled with them, and means Hashem was with them. So even though the location was a midbar, a wilderness, we see that the king is in the wilderness. So why doesn't he bring that as an example in the mashal, that the king is going all the way from the wilderness to his royal palace? And now he's going to go on the brackets to explain some more about Hashem's interaction and being in the wilderness. So he says, more specifically in Nisyosim, Bamidbar Madgolim, they're traveling in the wilderness with the flags. It was in such a way that the same way how they encamped, that's how they traveled. In other words, the setup of the different flags, that under every flag was 3 shvatim. So therefore, under each, the same setup of how they surrounded the Arim when they encamped, that same setup was how the Am Yisrael traveled. So what is this What's the inner meaning about it? That there was the function of the traveling and there was the function of camping. So he says, line 31, She'inyan devi yisou kuba midbar kvishu mitzad atzmei. The idea of when the Yidden traveled, that was in the wilderness the way it was on its own, without any type of true transformation. But the idea that they encamped it's in such a way that they transform and make from the wilderness itself a settled place. In other words, what happens when you encamp? You are now bringing like civilization to the place of the encampment. So you are making it a place, Asher Yoshev Adam Sham. We said earlier, the Midbar, Asher Lo Yoshev Adam Sham, that the man and supernal man did not settle, but by the Yidden being told by divine order to camp in a certain place, so they were now bringing godliness, and they were bringing Adam, they were bringing civilization in the spiritual sense to wherever they encamped. According to the explanation of the Baal Shem Tov, every single person, according to the Baal Shem Tov, goes through their entire lifetime, all the 42 encampments that the Yidden went through when they traveled from their first journey in the Midbar until they reached Yericho, or the Yarden. Move on. So from this is understood that these ideas of encampments, even in the wilderness, is to be found now as well. Calls and moving from all this understood. Also in the wilderness, the king is found. So we have to understand why is it saying specifically about the king in the field, since the king is also there in the midbar, like we saw from the examples of the Yidden traveling around the midbar. So therefore, a more powerful expression of this would be that we say from one extreme to another extreme. The king is out in the midbar, in the wilderness, and he travels all the way till he goes to his royal palace, and on the way the people greet him, etc., etc. Second paragraph on page Zion, line 8. Also, we need to understand what he says, that the Yidden are grazing, are going out to pasture amongst the roses. The idea of a going out to graze, that has to do with where sheep feed and graze and go to pasture. And seemingly, since the month of El is a very elevated time, we said the last 40 days of Moshe Rabbeinu, we said we compared it to the first 40 days. Obviously, the first 40 days when Moshe Rabbeinu was in Har Sinai and Hashem was teaching him the Torah and giving him the first luchas, obviously that was a very high time. So the last 40 days are also a very elevated time. Those first 40 days, the Yidden were like prior to the sin of the Eitz Hadas. It said that by Matan Torah, the dirt and the tumah that the Yidden or humanity had received through the Eitz Hadas left them. The tumah that came from the snake when he joined with Chava. So he should have used a better term. About לדודי ודודי, you want to talk about the love? Talk about the love of a father and his child. It's a lot closer than the association between a shepherd and his flock. It's a higher connection than the connection between a shepherd and his sheep. Could isa medrash like it's brought down the medrash. Move bedrushim, it's brought down the mamodim. Sheisrolim lakadosh baruch hu huli la'ava ani le'leben. That Yidden say to the Eibishter that Hashem is to me as a father, and the Eibishter says about the Yidden. The Yidden go on to say, and I, Klal Yisrael, are for the Eibishter like a son. Huli l'raya, he is to me like a shepherd, vani lo'letzoin, and I'm to him like sheep, which shows that the first milah, the first quality, the first advantage, the higher level, is first idea be the relationship of a father and son, and only afterwards do we refer to the relationship of a shepherd and his flock. The idea of a father and son is much higher than a shepherd and his flock and his sheep. Since Yidden are considered children to the Hashem, saying like it says in our parsha, you are children to Hashem your God. So therefore also over here in the pasuk he should have also used a term which indicates the love and association between a father and a son. Why does it say the one that goes out to graze amongst the roses, that's connected specifically to sheep?